Hey, what's going on? It's your girl, Miss Little Cool. I'm coming to you straight out of NYC on this beautiful, lovely looking Monday afternoon. So, before I begin, I want to apologize if you heard a noise in the background. That was me. I belched. I'm going to come out and say it. So, I apologize in advance. So, anyway, I want to take the time out to really talk about something that I should have mentioned and did a review on earlier, because I did see it when it first happened during the live segment. And that is the NBC special Annie Live. And I am not a person that do reviews, and I didn't forget about the review that you guys voted on. But because this is a musical and it's not a show, it's a special event, I'm going to do my review on the Annie Live presentation. Annie is a musical, and NBC since I believe 2012 have done live musical shows on different classic musicals, and I believe they've done 7, and this is the 7th one. So I am an Annie fan. I get that from my mother, and I'm really happy that the musical was done on her birthday. And that meant a lot to me. And especially, I don't like to talk about certain things in that aspect. I'm not going to go into it when it comes to my mom. But that was something that I hold dear to my heart, because she was a huge fan, because she grew up reading Littleorphanannie, which was a comic book strip. And it was different adventures she would be on a run. It was her, Daddy Warbucks, Sandy, and Mrs. Hannigan, that little tramp, But anyway, I'm going to talk about that now. So the musical itself, Littleorphanannie, is set in 1933 New York City. And it's about a young girl who never met her parents. She doesn't know what happened to them, but she believes that one day she's going to see them, and she never gives up hope. In the midst of all of it, you have different people that she interacts with, mainly children her age, and they all live in an orphanage, and it's in the slums of it's not downtown, but it's like midtown, what you would call Hell's Kitchen. And it was known at one time one of the worst places to live in New York City. Many people think that it was Harlem that was tough. No, Harlem has always been respected, but Hell's Kitchen has always been the worst of the worst when it comes to New York, particularly on the Isle of Manhattan. As a native New Yorker, I can tell you that firsthand. Now, Annie lives in an orphanage that's run by a woman who is just lousy. I would say is a borderline sadist. She's a horrible human being, and she's oversexed, and she's a nymphomaniac, and her name is Agnes Hannigan. And she was portrayed by tarajiphenson, and the little girl playing Annie was portrayed by celinasmith, who is a black girl, which was really major, because that's the first time on TV in a musical that a black girl portrayed the title character. Now, you also have Daddy Warbucks that's portrayed by Harry Connick Jr., and you have the woman who is the secretary. She's portrayed by Nicolescherzinger. And then you have her brother, and Agnes Hannigan's brother, portrayed by Titus Burgess, the talented guy. And then you have somebody else, the girlfriend. I believe her name is Lily. She was portrayed by an actress named Megan St. Hilly, who was the substitute for the person who was supposed to be on there, Jane Krakowski, who's famous for being on NBC's 30 Rock. So, I'm going to go back to the synopsis, and which is Annie pretty much cannot stand Mrs. Hannigan. None of the kids can, but Annie's the one that gives it to her. She can't stand her, and she lets her know it. So what happens is that there's a man who comes to pick up the laundry every day, and of course Mrs. Hannigan, she throws herself at him, and he has a bin, and Annie uses the opportunity to jump in the bin to basically escape, which she does. And when she escapes, she meets a dog, and she names the dog Sandy because of the color and how the dog looks. Now, what happens, there's a cop, and he's like one of those old Irish cops that's really mean. And he wants to know where was Annie doing out here, and who's the dog. And she says, it's my dog. So he doesn't believe her, because he's going to take her in and then take the dog to the hound, where he becomes basically grounded meat. And they used to do stuff like that in those days. They really did. So she calls Sandy over the first 2 times. Sandy doesn't respond. But then finally, when she sees the cop is going to take him, she says, oh, Sandy, come in. So then Sandy finally runs. Good boy. And then the cop is like, okay, but if I catch you out here again, you won't go. It's going to be some consequences. You won't go to jail, because you're a child. You shouldn't be out here by yourself anyway. So after that scene, she sees a group of people that are singing about Herbert Hoover. And the song is called Hooverville. That's a very good song. Now, I'm not going to go into the politics of that just yet. I'm just going to say about the song. And then what happens is she meets a woman who's a secretary. And the secretary is a woman that works for Mr. Daddy Warbucks. So Mr. Warbucks is a multi-billionaire, which was something that was unheard of in the 1930s. So he basically made a lot of millions when he was coming up as a person, as a young man, and he didn't play fair. He didn't play fair, but he played smart. And what occurred is that during World War I, he became mega rich. And by the 20s, his stock really, really picked up. It went through the roof. But unlike a lot of people who were his peers who lost money during the Great Depression, he was able to not only sustain his wealth, but even grow, because he had investments in war bonds, and he had investments overseas, and he played the political game very well. He was an unapologetic Republican, but he was a Republican that's like, listen, I'll work with any government person, and if I can kind of buy you, yeah, I'm going to do that too. So he wasn't the, I would say the most pristine person, but he was not sadistic like Mrs. Hannigan. So what happens is that in the press, he's not really that favorable, because people are saying, you got all this money, got all this wealth, but you could do something really good and give back. You could give back by, pretty much, bringing in a poor child to stay at your mansion. So what happens is he tells his secretary, who's played by nicolescherzinger, to stop by an orphanage in New York and have her, the secretary was called Grace, Mrs. Grace. She was a secretary, but she was also a writer too. And she was also a social worker. She was a social worker, but she was a secretary. So trained as a social worker, he has her to go see Miss Hannigan, and she is to pick up children from an orphanage. Now, the thing is that Daddy Warbucks, he wanted boys. So he didn't do his homework, and neither did Miss Grace, because when they arrived, they see girls. But one of the girls that Miss Grace sees is Annie. Now, she tells Miss Hannigan, we're looking for somebody who, is like smart and, cute. Somebody that can, like really have a great time with Mr. Warbucks. And so Annie is in the background pulling her curls and so forth. And she pretty much gets picked. Miss Hannigan doesn't really want her to be picked, but Miss Grace really likes her. Now, the reason why I thought it was really interesting that she was able to be picked is because Annie has short hair. So Annie doesn't look like the quintessential little girl. Annie has like a very tomboyish look about her, particularly in the classic, Little Orphan Annie series. You see her hair short and tight and curly. Now, even though she's a little black girl, her hair was actually, in the wig, is a little much longer than most of the Annies that were portrayed, except for Quavinjane Wallace character. So, and then you got the other Annies too. Their wigs are longer, but her wig is the only one that's black. And I'm going to get to that later on. So she meets him at the orphanage, and she's supposed to stay there for a week. And Daddy Warbucks sees her. He's not really excited because she's not a boy. So it's not a color thing. It's a gender thing. So you have Annie kind of upset at first, but then she comes around, and then he really turns out to really like her. And they hit it off. And then after the week is up, he wants to adopt her as his child. Now, back at the orphanage, you have her brother coming over and his fiance, wife, whatever, they coming over, and they kind of tacky. But I want to get to another scene. There's another scene where Daddy Warbucks wants her to sign, which is Miss Hannigan, to sign the paper. And Miss Hannigan doesn't want to do it. So then he says, okay, fine. You don't want to sign the papers over for her to be adopted? I'm going to show you your criminal record. You're basically a drunk. You basically walk around scantily clad. You a dancer, which was like code word for doing like basically selling your body on the low in those days. You were a prostitute. You was dancing for money. That means you was a stripper. And you're basically running this orphanage, and you got these kids working, which was another common thing they did back then. And he said, I can get you to lose your license to run this orphanage. So after a while, even though she wanted to have sex with Daddy Warbucks, she was like, sign it. And so she signs it. And she was like, why you didn't tell me that in the first place? So then you meet the brother and his girl, and they sing the song Easy Street. And then she pretty much concocts a scheme where I found her locket. And if you pretend to be her parents, you'll be able to, steal her back from me. Or you could just take her. I don't care. So when you get to the mansion, you see that Annie has well adjusted, and she's basically about to be adopted by the family. But they come over and they want to pick her up, and they was like, we her parents. So he was like, listen, you're not going to get her at all. But Annie says, I've been waiting to find out my family for a long time. And finally it's coming true, because Annie is so desperate to want to know what happened to her parents. She will believe anybody who says that's her father or her mother. So he's like, okay, fine. I'm going to give you 3 days to prove it. And if you prove it, I will give you Annie. And Annie's name is Annie Bennett. So they come in and they pretend that their last name is the Bennetts. But Daddy Warbucks is not dumb. He also offers them money and says, you can also take the money. So he does a background check, and he's like, I know those are not her parents. And then they tell the truth, because he did a background check, and he said her parents passed away. After they basically dropped off to the orphanage, they passed away in a car accident. So that's why she was left an orphan. And whether Miss Hannigan knew or not, Annie didn't know. So what occurred is that you go into the scene where they're talking with the president, and that's FDR, because this is 1933. So in 1933, to give you a backstory, America was in the worst condition ever since the Civil War. And this is when I become very, very, very passionate when I talk about this, because I learned this from my grandmother, who was a teenager. A Democrat won the election after a Republican president named Hoover, hence the song that I just mentioned, Hooverville, spoke in a way that he didn't care about the country. He had a benign neglect policy about how to heal the country from the Depression, because the Depression started in 1930, but the crash was 29. So he only had one good year of the economy of America being on top. 30, 31, 32, it was like boom. Okay? So he was a one-term president. He was a one and done. FDR took this country and spun it around and put in policies that, yes, they were socialistic policies, but those policies not only saved the country, but it fed everyone and it put people back to work. Now, in the musical, he mentions that I'm going to create work programs. I'm going to create jobs. I'm going to train people. That was the first time that ever happened. Because before that, it was like, if you don't have a job, can't get a job. That's when it's like, no, I'm going to create programs to get everybody in a job. Not just white people, but also black people. And he was one of the first presidents that had black people in positions of cabinet. In his cabinet. And we all know the story that America would end up not being back on the top, but he led us into World War II. And he is the person who helped us to become a superpower, even though he passed away before the war was over, before we left and, we did what we did. But this man, FDR, in my opinion, is one of the best presidents we ever had. And he is the reason why many black people are not just in the party, but they're never going to leave because they remember what he did and how his policies affect black people, particularly in the South. Now, getting back to the musical, FDR does end up meeting Annie. He meets her and he grows really fond of her. And Daddy Warbucks, being a billionaire, he's willing to work with FDR. FDR is willing to work with him because, remember, he's trying to get this country back on track. The country is poorer than a lot of the millionaires. So they pretty much come up with like a plan to have people put people to work in Daddy Warbucks businesses. So that's one of the things. So he opens up that program and it's like, I'm going to have people, work for me and so forth. And that's just the start of building back America for the better. Now, the fake Bennetts come back, aka Miss Hannigan's brother and his girlfriend, and they come up the scheme to pick Annie up. So Daddy Warbucks, he lets them know, y'all ain't it. And what happens is that they end up getting arrested, and FDR is there, and they bring in the FBI, and they arrest them. And as for Mrs. Hannigan, they don't arrest her. Her punishment is basically they put her ass to work. Because if you really think about it, she had those kids using them for free labor. That's why she had that orphanage. She didn't want to work. She just wanted to make money because, in orphanages, you get checks. The kids were basically on the county getting checks because they was orphans. They didn't have anywhere to go. And she was keeping all that money for herself. She had them girls looking ragged. Like ragged. They was wearing rags. They didn't have any new clothes. They rarely was taking baths because more than likely they didn't have any running water. And she didn't teach those girls any life skills, social skills. And the only one that was kind of clean was Annie, because Annie was kind of like, she was mentally okay in a sense. A lot of those other kids, you could tell there was some mental imbalances between them. But also too, is that they put her to work and she didn't like that. But she didn't go to jail, but she went to work. And she was going to be on the project building the bridge. So she was going to use a lot of labor. Now, in the end, him, Daddy Warbucks, and Miss Grace, they end up, becoming engaged. He falls in love with her. And her and him and Annie Bennett become a happy family. And he officially adopts her. And Annie becomes Annie Warbucks. Okay? And they sing their song. And, Annie, she sings Tomorrow, and they sing their finale song. And I want to say that, to me, it was a really good musical. Now, I'm going to bring out some of the things that I liked and some of the things I didn't like. What I liked about it was that the little girl, Annie, held her own. She didn't break at any time, nor did the other kids break. What I loved about it was I loved Taraji P. Henson's number. When she sung Little Girls, when she sung Sign and Easy Street. She did a very good job with those songs. I really think Taraji P. Henson is a very good singer. I noticed that when she sung Little Girls, her low register, when she first started, it was like a little bit trembling. But she did say, I haven't sung in such a long time. And this is my first time doing musical theater since my days at Howard. And she did a really good job, and she held her own. And To me, she sort of made me forget that she was the Taraji Henson, in a sense, because Taraji has never played a villain. And she was a villain, but she wasn't like sadistic. Not like Kathy Bates in her version of Annie. She was evil. She was real evil. That was an evil woman. But she played it more like Carol Burnett. And she was paying homage to that one, because that's the one she grew up seeing in 82. She pretty much loved how she portrayed it. And it was more family friendly. I also liked how the beginning of Annie, you saw like them paying homage to the present. And then they went backstage, put on the 1933 clothes. And then in the end, you see the children of today. And then you see the cast standing around in beautiful dresses, because in the end, Daddy Warbucks invites all of her friends over to basically stay at the mansion for like a short time for like Christmas. But you know they wasn't going to live there. But it lets you know that he was probably going to take care of them and have children actually living in an actual orphanage place, and a place where children could be children, because that was going on in the 30s. That's the rise of the social service organizations were really big, and that's why we have them, to prevent children from being abused. So you see in the end the children of today paying homage to the children yesterday, and they all coming together, and also the little girls, because a lot of people don't know this. Little girls were very discarded back in the 1930s, 1920s, 1910s, but definitely during the Great Depression. Little girls were not respected because they were considered a dime a dozen. They were easy to produce. Most people have girls, but the boys they will hold on to, because it's the saying, it's very hard to create a boy child. So the boys were always prized, and that's pretty much that idea of how children are discarded gave way to the rise of the second wave of feminism to protect not just women, but also young girls. I ain't going to get to the feminist thing, but I'm just wanted to give y'all that take as to why that was done like that. Also, I did like Titus Burgess. I love him from The Adventures of the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. He's a talented person. He's a very, very good singer. And he should be bigger than what he is now. And those are the things I like. And I love the clothes, especially Nicolescherzinger's character's clothes. I love those shoes. And I even like two of the outfits that Taraji wore as Misshannigan. I like those too. That set with the lime green little slip, and then the robe. I like that. And I loved her wig, because I think she looks really great wearing her hair curly. Now here, and another thing too, I loved the fact that they read Herbert Hoover and that song Hooverville. I mean, they told his ass up. They let it be known. You horrible, you're trash, you got me in this condition. I was making a lot of money, and then all of a sudden, I'm broke because of you. Because of you, I got to stand outside to get heat in the cold. I got to stand outside in the cold to get heat by putting my hands under the fire. You ain't shit. You're a horrible person. And they called his ass out. And I loved it, because my grandmother personally hated him, because he put everybody in a poorhouse because he did not care. And if he would have been the president for a second term, this would have never been another country. America would have been done. And I'm saying that to all y'all conservatives out there that really, 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 really want to ignore the fact that FDR was the best president. You got people thinking that Herbert Hoover was better than FDR. This is the type of mentality that's going around. And this is the type of things that they want to teach children instead of trying to teach true history. I'm not talking about CRT, but I'm talking about true history, true American history. Now, with that being said, I'm going to go to the criticism. The one thing that I did not like is that I hardly saw Sandy in the musical. Sandy and Annie are like by the hip. You got to have Sandy a lot. Now, in the movie, Sandy was there. But in the musical, the dog was only there twice. And I'm like, where did Sandy go? Now, maybe Sandy couldn't stay in the house with Daddy Warbucks maybe they wasn't able to write that in. Maybe it didn't gel, but I just thought that it was unfair that the dog was there in the beginning and then was there in the end. He missed all the fun. Like, where was he? Who was taking care of Sandy? Who was taking care of Sandy? So that was my thing. Another thing, too, is that I did not like how they had Taraji's Mrs. Hannigan too overly sexed. Now, in other versions, yes, she is a flirt. Yes, she's horrible, but she was throwing herself at everybody. And I'm going to say this. I didn't like how they didn't have at least one person that was black. They didn't. Like, they could have had one black man that she was throwing herself at. And it gave me the vibe that she was a prostitute when she was young. And that her brother came up to New York from the South to basically, live this good life. But they didn't have the tools and the skills. So they had no choice but to pimp out their you-know-what. And he became a con and she became, you could say, a slut. Or, making money from, surviving. And she could have probably, danced and so forth. But her character looked like she was like maybe 45 years old. I get the sense her character was born probably around 1887. That's what I pick up. Or maybe her character was born in maybe 1891. Maybe her character was 42. But she definitely wasn't in her 30s. And so, or maybe she was, I don't know, because Taraji looked young. But anyway, I didn't like seeing that. That was just me. And can we talk about the guy that was in 4 different scenes? He played the person with the sheets. He played the laundry person, the homeless person in Hooverville. He played the butler. And he played one of the advisors for FDR. He was the white man with the bald head and the reddish beard. And I want to say something too. Daddy Warbucks, he was similar to FDR because he had a lot of people working for him that were black. And if you work as a person in like a huge, in those days, you worked for a billionaire, you made a lot of money. You made a lot of money. I'm not saying that he was racist, but more than likely his character itself wasn't. He wasn't. Even if you go into the movie and you look at the movie, it's things about him that shows that he wasn't racist. Not saying he was a friend of the community, but I'm saying he definitely was not a race. He definitely didn't hate black people. He was just a man out to be rich on his own terms, and he was going to screw anybody to the top if he had to. I mean, screw anybody to the top, like cut out the competition by any means. And his competition were other white men. That's all. And so I'm wrapping it up. And I want to say this is my first review of a show in a very long time. I would say over 2 years. And I want to thank everybody for listening. I know it was long, but trust me, I'm getting better at this. And please comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I will talk to you soon. And definitely, I wouldn't say share it with your bunch of children, but definitely share it. And definitely shout out to Taraji P. Henson. She's 51 and she still got it. And in my opinion, I believe that she's going to be the next Cicely Tyson. That's how. Well, no. I can't say Cicely Tyson because that's Viola. I would say she'll probably be the next Diane Carroll. She's going to be the next Diane Carroll. But it was a great musical to watch. I also loved how they called out, different things. Because it did get political somewhat. And I just love the fact that it gave hope. Because this year and the past year, and then for me personally, the 2019, it's been rough. And, we got to get it together as a country. And definitely as a world. We got to be free again. And with that being said, it's your girl, Miss Little Cool. I am signing out. Thank you for listening to my commentary. Take care and have a wonderful day.